fair to say not a great week for the White House, a string of very public rebukes from his own party.
Let's review. Republican senators failed to repeal Obamacare. They did not back the president's attacks on Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The Pentagon is questioning the president's policy change on transgender troops. It says it will not implement them, at least not yet. And the Boy Scouts of America apologized over the president's pretty political speech to a group of boys. Joining us now to discuss, CNN political director David Chalian. I think we're going to title this segment, what the F happened this week? David Chalian, this was quite a week.
Yeah, I think you're underselling it there, saying not a great week. It was a terrible week. I think the White House got completely exposed this week as entirely dysfunctional. I think the Trump presidency revealed itself to be in serious trouble because, as you just laid out, I think, guys, this is the first week that we saw some significant cracks among the president's own fellow partisans, his cohorts, his supporters, whether it was conservative media and Republican senators saying, don't touch Jeff Sessions, not just backing him, but pushing back on the president. Some out there saying Sessions was right to recuse himself. Or, as you noted, the Boy Scouts coming out and regretting that they had the president of the United States there and that it became political. These are cracks and fissures that we haven't seen before. His own military. So it's different than the usual critics and what we've seen before. I think this week was quite new and astonishing. We haven't even talked about the word Russia yet. That wasn't the dominant narrative as what was causing the White House so much trouble this week.
But, David, didn't we see in John McCain's thumb down last night the impact of this potentially on policy, on not being able to get things done when you put your chief of communications on CNN Live for half an hour and he doesn't use that as an opportunity to make the case on this health care you desperately need? I mean, was this a rebuke of not just the legislation, but the president?
There's no doubt that when John McCain cast that vote, he understood that this was going to be a huge failure of the president's to get this major promise through and of his party's 7-year-long promise overall. It is a rebuke of that. I don't know that if Anthony Scaramucci came on New Day and talked about health care for half an hour, that John McCain would have done anything differently yesterday. But it is a political reality.
But the point is they're not selling it, David. They're not taking this time to sell it, right?
Without a doubt, Poppy, I totally agree. And it is a political reality that if you are going to run a White House in chaos, do nothing to galvanize the American people behind you or your agenda, you are going to have a harder time having legislators bend to your will. And I think President Trump saw that this week.
Let me read you. We've been waiting to hear from President Trump. What would he say this morning about all this? And he did just make a statement in 140 characters. Let me read it to you. He goes, if Republicans are going to pass great futures legislation in the Senate, they must immediately go to a 51-vote majority, not senseless 60. This is something the president has talked about before. He doesn't like the fact that you need to get 60 votes for some things in the Senate. Not, however, for instance, health care last night does not apply to the massive failure he just suffered in the Senate, David. Plus, Republican senators have told us on this show, including Senate leadership, it's a bad idea what the president's asking. And not to mention the fact, I'm not sure what the president wants is 51 votes. I think he wants to be able to get this all done with one vote, his. And he's learning the hard way that that's not the case.
He doesn't get one last time I checked the Constitution. But here's the thing, John. When I watched at the beginning of this week, and this is what I would tweet back to the president just to make sure he's clear on this, you saw 43 votes for a replacement plan that added Medicaid dollars, tried to get more regulations dealt with to appeal to both moderates and conservatives. You saw 45 votes in the Senate for repeal only. They can't get to 50 votes on this. It has nothing to do with 60.
David Chalian, great to have you here with us. Thanks so much for your analysis, sir.
Thank you.
Minutes from now, Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi speaks after Republicans in the Senate failed to repeal Obamacare. What is she going to say, and how is she going to react to John McCain's now historic thumbs down?
And what will she offer in terms of fixing health care?
What will Democrats do? Yep.
Dino is a snake.
New this morning, Russia retaliates, just ordering U.S. diplomats, some of them, to leave Moscow and demanding that U.S. vacate 2 properties. All of this is in direct response to a new Russian sanctions bill that is sitting on the president's desk waiting for him to sign it.
Will he sign it, though? Because This was overwhelmingly passed by the Senate last night, but it does ultimately take away power from the president. So what happens next? Let's go to Michelle Kaczynski. She joins us from the State Department with more. Good morning.
Hi, right. Yeah, there are really no good options here for the president. If he signs it, as you said, this takes away power from him. It's essentially Congress saying, we don't trust you. We want some say in Russia sanctions. And if he didn't sign it, first of all, it looks like it's another gift to Russia. And the veto would likely be overridden, given those numbers. So Russia has responded. For months, it's been threatening to do something in kind to the U.S. after the U.S. kicked out dozens of its diplomats at the end of the Obama administration, seized its 2 properties that it used, these enormous estates in Maryland and New York. But the State Department as recently as a week ago was saying, well, don't listen to what Russia is saying. Let's see what Russia is doing. They almost sounded like they were dismissing that Russia was going to do something anytime soon. And then, of course, this morning, they did. So the U.S. will now have to limit the number of diplomatic staff that are in Russia to the same number that Russia is allowed, just over 400. Russia is also restricting the use of 2 different properties. And there was a U.S. response that we just got to. But let's read first what the Russian Foreign Ministry said this morning, talking about the sanctions bill that just passed. This measure is further proof of the United States' extremely hostile foreign policy. Hiding behind its sense of superiority, the United States arrogantly ignores the stances and interests of other countries. The bill is an obvious indication that relations with Russia are being dragged down by political infighting in the United States. Pretty typical Russian response there. And then the U.S. Embassy in Moscow responded by saying, we've received the Russian government notification. Ambassador Teft expressed his strong disappointment and protest. We've passed the notification back to Washington for review. So at this point, we're still waiting for more from the State Department. What will their response be to this retaliation that was swift, even before the president could sign this bill? Or I guess we should say, or not.
That's right. All right, Michelle Kaczynski at the State Department. Thanks so much. Let's get reaction now from Capitol Hill. Joining us, Democratic Congressman David Cicilline of Rhode Island, part of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. Your reaction to this move by Russia today, kicking out U.S. diplomats, shutting some facilities.
Well, I think it shouldn't be unexpected. Look, Russia is not our friend. We passed the sanctions bill not only because of their interference in our presidential elections, but their aggressive behavior in Crimea, their actions in Syria. So Russians are acting contrary to American national security interests in places around the world. We have a responsibility to send a strong message that we will not tolerate that. And it's not a surprise that they responded this way. But we need to send them a very strong message so we can protect the integrity of our elections and so that we can reduce the kind of aggression that they're engaged in around the world.
And if the president decides not to sign the sanctions bill, the response?
I think it would be very hard for the president to do that. This is a sanction bill which imposes sanctions on North Korea, Iran for their ballistic missile system, and Russia. Very important sanctions, overwhelmingly passed by the House and Senate in a very bipartisan way. They're both, in the House at least, it's veto-proof. I think it is, of course, as well in the Senate. So I don't think the president can do math, we hope, and he would know that they would be overridden. It's very important these sanctions go into place.
So, Congressman, obviously health care in the Senate went down last night overnight, the efforts to repeal and replace Obamacare. I'm not sure whether you were staying awake, watching what was happening, but whether or not you were watching or whether you heard it when you woke up, what was your reaction when you saw John McCain give that thumbs down?
I was, of course, very pleased. I mean, the Senate bill would have resulted in 16 million people losing their health insurance, premiums going up on an average of 20%, making it more difficult and more expensive for people with pre-existing conditions to get health care. So that was an important bill to defeat. I think it was a direct response to the voices of the American people that have been demanding that we protect and improve the Affordable Care Act. So this was the kind of third or fourth try by the Republicans in the Senate. What I hope now will happen is that Republicans will work with Democrats. There are ways we can fix the things that we need to fix in the Affordable Care Act, make it work even better for the American people. If they will finally give up this idea of repealing it and throwing tens of millions of people off health health insurance. I think there are things we can do together to fix the concerns that we all have and make it work even better than it does.
I think there's no question that everyone has concerns, but we and you don't feel them as acutely because we don't rely on these necessarily individual exchanges that are suffering under Obamacare. Christine Roman's just laid out all of the states, over 20, where some counties only have one option, which is no competition. What is incumbent on Democrats like yourself to do right now to fix it for people?
Well, we have had a number of proposals that we've offered. In fact, a group of Democrats had a press conference just last week laying out a number of ideas. Our caucus is filled with folks who have pieces of legislation or have been talking about ways that we can improve the Affordable Care Act to create more competition in those marketplaces, to drive down premiums, drive down out-of-pocket expenses, reduce the cost of prescription drugs. There's no lack of ideas. We just have to have someone who's a willing partner on the other side of the table to work with us. So far, the Republicans and the president have been committed to repealing the Affordable Care Act and have rejected any effort to work with us to actually make these improvements. If now, finally, after last night's vote, they're willing to do that, they're going to find willing partners.
I will say what Republicans will say is that Democratic leadership has sent a message for Democrats not to do anything, to sit and wait for the Republican efforts to fail. So I will say there is a view on both sides. I know you disagree. Look, they say this is what the Republicans say. They say, where were you? We've been looking for your help.
That's not accurate. They have said from the beginning, they've had 40 votes in the last Congress to repeal the Affordable Care Act in its entirety. They've said our effort is to repeal. That has always been their mantra. They've said that publicly. We've said as long as you would abandon the notion of appeal, you will have willing partners to improve. All right,
I understand. So you gave them a condition. All I'm saying is they're saying they feel like they had to go this alone. Hopefully now everyone can get together and work on something. But you're right. They did not have hearings. They didn't have hearings. They didn't have hearings.
And they rejected 150 amendments when they brought forth their bill. They rejected 150 Democratic amendments in that process. So they had no interest in working with Democrats, and they should, because this is something that has to be done in a bipartisan way.
Agreed. I'd love to see it happen. If it does happen, let me just get your take on the Democratic Party for 1 second right now, because your colleague from the North, Seth Moulton of Massachusetts, says he wants to see a Democratic leadership change by 2018. He was asked if he wanted this leadership on a bumper sticker for the 2018 election. He said no. What do you think of that?
Well, I think what we did, Sherry Bustos, Hakeem Jeffries, and I were elected by our caucus to develop the long-term Democratic agenda. We launched a better deal, higher wages, better jobs for a better future, a really bold economic agenda that will increase people's incomes, reduce the cost in their lives, and prepare them for the jobs of the 21st century. And we're going to be sharing that with our constituents all across the country.
All right, but
over the
just to
August
put a button
recess.
on it, Congressman, to John's question, do you agree with your fellow Democrat Representative Seth Moulton, who said, yeah, no, I don't want this leadership going into 2018. We can't win with it. Is he right or wrong? Yes or no?
We were elected, Sherry, Hakeem, and I, as part of the leadership to do this work. Our Democratic leader and our whip were elected several months ago. This is really about Democrats having a very bold and strong economic agenda that will raise incomes for folks, that will prepare them for the jobs of the 21st century, create 10 million good-paying full-time jobs. I think that's what matters to people. Is the people who execute it is actually not as significant. What matters is, are we promoting an agenda that improves the lives of the American people? I think that's what people are focused on. They want to know, what are we going to do to make their life better?
So your message to Chuck Schumer, the leadership doesn't matter on this one. We're going to do what
it doesn't matter. I mean, it's just
I just asked you twice and you didn't answer. So you can answer the question, or I've got to read between the lines.
It's not that it doesn't matter. What does matter, though, is the substance of the work that we are doing and the fight we're going to have on behalf of the American people. I think we elected our Democratic leader. We elected our whip. We elected our team.
We got to leave it there.
To serve us 2 years, and I expect
we got to leave it there. I'm driving the control room nuts on timing. Congressman, thank you. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Good sport. Appreciate you coming on. Come on again.
The president taking hits this week from the Senate, military leaders, even the head of the Boy Scouts. Where does he go next?
And then just a crazy story, driven to kill over laughter.
Morning, all eyes once again on the White House for a potential new eruption of anger over Republicans' stunning overnight failure to repeal Obamacare.
Yeah, so far the president has been silent, but this caps a tumultuous week inside the West Wing as it roils with growing Republican defiance, presidential insults, and this verbal knife fight between two of his top advisors. I suppose we should warn you, viewer discretion is advised. CNN's Athena Jones at the White House with the very latest. Athena.
Hi, John. Well, I'm not going to repeat some of the profanity you're talking about from Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci, directed at Chief of Staff Reince Priebus and another of the president's top advisors, Steve Bannon. But that has been getting a lot of attention, along with the failure of this health care repeal. Let's talk about that first. We know this went down overnight. The only response we've seen from the White House so far is a tweet in the early morning hours, about 2:25 a.m., from the president, not long after that bill went down, and when he tweeted, 3 Republicans and 48 Democrats let the American people down. As I said from the beginning, let Obamacare implode, then deal. Watch. So clearly that tweet showing the president is not going to change his strategy of publicly blaming and shaming his fellow Republicans who stood in the way of getting this bill through. And of course, we've been talking about this all morning. This is a huge blow to the president and to the White House. They're still struggling to show that they can get things done, big things done legislatively, more than 6 months into the job. When it comes to the Scaramucci matter, what's so interesting here is that it's really, really uncommon. We can't highlight this enough to see such a public display of animosity coming from a communications director to other senior members of the White House staff. He repeatedly used the F word in a phone call with the New Yorker's Ryan Lizza in talking about both Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon. He used other vulgar terminology we can't say on TV to refer to Bannon. And, you know, Scaramucci himself later tweeted, not an apology, but just saying, you know, he uses colorful language. He'll refrain from doing that in this arena, but he'll remain passionate about pushing the president's agenda. Asked about this last night, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, incoming press secretary, said he's using colorful language. I don't anticipate he'll do it again. But she has also talked about how the President Trump, encourages competition. She says healthy competition, which he believes can get results. But so far, this infighting is proving to be much more of a distraction. And when it comes to the disruption of Washington that the president and his team promised, this idea of coming in with a better way of doing things, the only disruption we're seeing so far is here at the White House. And it looks like it's standing in the way of him getting his agenda through.
Getting anything through. Athena Jones, thank you. So, as Athena just said, Scaramucci is certainly making the headlines. He's on a mole hunt as well. The new White House communications director, 1 week in, promising to fire everyone until the White House leaks are plugged. Joining us now, Ned Ryan, former speechwriter for President George W. Bush and CEO at American Majority, and Alex Conant, former communications director for Marco Rubio and former White House and Republican National Committee spokesman. Nice to have you both here. And Alex, you wrote a piece about this just yesterday. And you said, look, these leaks, you can fire everyone. These leaks are not going to stop because one key thing is missing in the White House, and that is?
That's unity. I mean, you have all these different factions in the White House who feel empowered to leak against each other because they're trying to seek advantage. Look, this is a cultural problem at the White House. There's no unity, there's no loyalty, and there's no self-discipline. And it starts at the top. When you see the president attack members of his cabinet and undermine his own staff, then they're not going to be loyal to him. There is no such thing as blind loyalty in politics. People, it's a two-way street. And same thing with self-discipline. The president gives off-the-record interviews to reporters all the time where he says more than he should. The staff knows that, and they follow his lead.
You know, Anthony Scaramucci himself said that a fish rots from his head, but there are 2 fishes, he says, that don't smell. The president and Anthony Scaramucci. That is according to Anthony
True
Scaramucci.
Quote.
Yeah, I'm not making this up.
No,
You can't make this up.
no.
Ned, you know, where does this leave the White House right now? Axios suggesting this morning that maybe Anthony Scaramucci will, you know, try to step away from the spotlight a little bit. Maybe a good idea. What do you think happens now with Inside the West Wing?
Well, first of all, I want to agree with Alex and say, first of all, everybody that works inside the West Wing and the White House serves at the pleasure of the president and should be putting his priorities first, not their own. So, you know, my hope is that moving forward, senior officials inside the White House would ask themselves before they speak to anybody outside of the White House, whether it's press or anyone else, it's what am I about to say in the best interests of the president and his agenda? And if it's not, you don't say it. And if you're driven by personal motivations and not the president's, you know, maybe it's time that you leave. But I will say this about Scaramucci really quickly. He's right about the leaks. The White House leaks have to stop, and the interagency leaks have to stop as well. And as we're looking at, are there potential shakeups coming, my hope would be if there's going to be a switching up of the team, if you will, I hope that it happens sooner rather than later because, again, this is distracting from some very positive narratives for the White House. By the way, yesterday,
Ned,
there were very positive
guy...
stories coming out that they stepped on. The GPS testimony, Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the A1 brothers, all of these things. They just need to get out of their way.
How can the guy who is saying he's going to fire everyone for the leaks, you know, lie detector test, all of it, how can he say that effectively and have it happen when he is leaking all of this other stuff and when he is saying Reince is on his way out and saying what he said about Reince and Steve Bannon?
Blank his own blank.
Well,
you said it, not me.
This is why I'm encouraging all senior officials inside the West Wing and the White House to ask themselves, is this a benefit to the agenda and the president? Take it internally, have these conversations. The thing that's amazing about this, first of all, having tension inside a West Wing is not unusual. Having it litigated in this public a manner is. Take it internally, have these conversations, deal swiftly with this, move on, focus on the agenda.
You know, it's not usual. It is also detrimental. And as Poppy points out, there's an enormous pot kettle problem here with Anthony Scaramucci and the issue of leaking. Alex, going into you, you know, and you run occasionally in circles within the Republican establishment here. Reince Priebus, you know, what's his future? You know, CNN had great reporting overnight from a whole team of people where one person close to the president called Reince Priebus the worst chief of staff we've seen in 25 years.
Well, look, I think there's plenty of finger pointing to go around inside the West Wing as to why there is so much dysfunction. You know, ultimately, the buck stops at the president's desk. And the president has not instilled a common purpose amongst his staff that is any bigger than just defending his own reputation. That is the simple truth. What is the purpose of the Trump administration? And does everyone in the West Wing agree that that is their purpose there? And is that what they're working towards together? That has not happened to date. I think that's why you see all these different factions. They just don't share a common vision inside that West Wing. And the president likes it that way. I mean, he likes to have people within his orbit feuding with each other. The problem is that leads to high dysfunction, as we've seen over the last couple of months in the White House. They need to unite, and then they need to show more loyalty and self-discipline, as I wrote in my piece in Politico.
I think they need to do some trust falls together. Go away.
It's actually true.
Go
they
away
need to do
for
a
a
retreat.
weekend.
Can you imagine this group on a retreat?
No, but I'll go cover it. Newt Gingrich, really quickly, Ned, called this a soap opera on Fox News. He's been a big proponent for the president.
Right.
Really, joking aside, what does this mean for the American people who were relying and betting their livelihood on this administration?
Well, again, I want to encourage them. Let's get past the drama, take it inside, deal with this. Again, tension's not unusual. Take it inside. Don't litigate this in public. Make any changes that have to happen, make them quickly, and go and focus on the agenda. There are a lot of good things happening. Again, we want to talk about the soap opera, and we're not able to talk about the $10 billion into Wisconsin with Foxconn. We're not able to talk about all these other positive narratives. Take this inside, have it inside the West Wing, stop litigating this in the public.
You know, we're not talking about Foxconn, but, you know,
we covered it yesterday.
But you know, we're also not necessarily talking about healthcare success because it failed overnight, and maybe there is some linkage there. Ned, Ryan, Alex, thank you so much for this discussion. You know, no swear words were spoken here. Small moral victory.
That's quite an achievement at 9:26
All right,
in the morning.
The president has not even signed off on the new Russia. All right, good morning, everyone. I'm John Berman.
And I'm Poppy Harlow. Breaking overnight, the thumb heard around the world. The thumb of John McCain, that is, an opposable dagger in Republican efforts to repeal and replace Obamacare after midnight in dramatic fashion after being cornered by colleagues, lobbied by the vice president, called by the president himself. The senator from Arizona voted no on what could be the Republicans' last best chance to overhaul Obamacare. He did it with a simple thumbs down. That thumb not just casting judgment on health care reform, but perhaps on the entire Trump presidency.
Yeah, presidency that seems less focused on policy than personality. A White House consumed with itself. Senior advisors hurling F-bombs at each other. One advisor saying that another likes to blank his own blank, and we don't even know if Steve Bannon can touch his own toes. All this as the Republican agenda withers in the shadows, the silent thumb of John McCain speaking volumes about all of that. This is a huge moment for health care and the presidency. As we speak, House Republicans are meeting right now to try to figure out what to do next. We got a lot to cover. Let us begin with CNN's Phil Mattingly on Capitol Hill, where he's been for the last 72 hours straight. Phil, what's going on right now?
Yeah, look, it's interesting you note that House Republicans are meeting right now, guys, because that meeting was supposed to be about health care and the next steps and the potential vote later today to go to conference with the bill the Senate was supposed to pass, but did not. And if you want to get kind of a sense of how dramatic last night was, there were audible gasps in the Senate chamber when Senator McCain voted no. Now, guys, it's worth noting there was some sense going on in the hours leading up to it that he was certainly not quite to yes yet. But the willingness to do that, the willingness, particularly after Republican leaders had been lobbying him furiously, had been trying every which way possible to get him on board. As you noted, Vice President Mike Pence, who was on hand to be the tie-breaking vote if McCain voted yes, at one point pulled him off to the side, outside the chamber. I'm told he was lobbying him for about 20 minutes, trying to walk him through the process of how this would all work. At one point, the president called the vice president, who then handed the phone to Senator McCain. President Trump trying to lobby Senator McCain. Nothing working. McCain joining Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins. 3 no votes, enough to sink this effort. Now, why did McCain actually do this? There's got a lot of theories running around, but I want to read you at least the latter half of his statement that underscores kind of his key complaint that we'd heard throughout the day. And it says, the Speaker's statement that the House would be willing to go to conference does not ease my concern that this shell of a bill could be taken up and passed at any time. Now, here's what if you guys think back, 12 hours ago, seems like about 7 days ago at this point. Senate Republicans had pared back their process. They hadn't been able to pass anything at all. What they were doing was a bare bones effort to just get the process into conference. A lot of senators, not just Senator John McCain, made very clear they were uncomfortable with the possibility that the House would just end up passing that bare bones bill, only taking away some of the mandates with major repercussions to insurance markets. The Speaker put out a statement saying he was willing to go to conference. The Speaker had personal phone calls with senators saying that they were willing to go to conference. That wasn't enough in the end. Now, obviously, the president has some skin in this game. He responded shortly after the vote with a tweet saying, 3 Republicans and 48 Democrats let the American people down. As I said from the beginning, let Obamacare implode, then deal, watch. Obviously, a major legislative loss for him, as you guys have pointed out. But I just want to add some context here because I think it's important, and you guys know this well. But in the U.S. Senate, the idea that a majority leader would be putting a bill on the floor that would eventually fail is almost an anathema. The idea that he would be putting the bill on the floor that Republicans have campaigned on for 7 years, that is responsible for the majorities in the House, the Senate, at least partially responsible for the man who's currently sitting in the White House, and have it fail by just 1 vote in this dramatic moment that nobody was totally sure was actually coming. It was surreal. You can't kind of even overstate the drama that was actually there. Big question now, guys, is what comes next. I was talking to a member who is about to head to the House Republican Conference now, and he said, we thought this was going to be about health care. Now, apparently, it's just a happy August conversation. Recess is coming. We'll see what comes next on health care, guys.
Not sure how much of a happy August it really is. High drama, high stakes, and high impact with this, Phil. I mean, this really matters a lot. Thank you so much for your reporting. Great reporting all night. Joining us now, CNN political analysts Alex Burns and Abby Phil, Christine Roman, CNN's chief business correspondent, and CNN's senior political reporter, Nia Malika Henderson. Nia, I want to start with you. Just wow. I mean, wow. This is after 7 years, of efforts from the Republicans to repeal and replace Obamacare. It ended last night with John McCain's thumb. I mean, is it just about health care being hard to fix?
In some ways, yes. I mean, and I think it's also about this repeal and replace, right? I mean, it was a great slogan, but when it came down to the real details, when it came down to making a policy argument about how they could do this, how they could deliver on their promises to lower premiums and to deal with some of the Medicaid problems and issues and expansions that were certainly of concern to the senators who are in those states that expanded Medicaid, they couldn't bridge the divide. I mean, it's really about, could you craft a bill that Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Rand Paul liked, right, and John McCain? And in the end, they ended up not being able to do that. As Phil said, this was great for them as a slogan, and you could see some of that sloganeering even in the end, this idea that this final bill was the Freedom Act or whatever it was. I mean, and in the end, they wanted to be free of this bill in so many ways, and that's exactly what ended up happening.
Alex, the president isn't happy, but he could have done a whole lot more. A big part of this is on the president, is it not? And as you noted on Twitter, his final message, his final sale on this one was, my attorney general is terrible.
Right. Over the last week, Poppy, you've really not heard a big, aggressive, pointed public sales pitch from the White House to the country about why this is important. You saw a lot of private lobbying of senators, of governors, by administration officials like Vice President Pence, like Secretary Tom Price. But this would have been an unprecedented event if the Senate had passed, and the House passed as well, a piece of legislation transforming a major social program and a huge slice of the American economy without any sustained effort to explain to the public what was in it and why they should support it as well. And as you mentioned, over the last week, the White House has been clearly far more consumed in terms of what ordinary people are hearing from them with staff drama than with health care.
You know, Abby, let's reflect for a moment on John McCain, right? You sort of the end note to a dramatic week for him. You know, he flew back, you know, and allowed debate to begin to the chagrin of Democrats, to the delight of Republicans. And then last night he gives the thumb down to the, you know, chagrin of Republicans and to the delight of Democrats here. What is this moment for him?
Well, it is sort of an opportunity for him that's born out of circumstances, really unfortunate circumstances. But in this case, this is a senator who has spent his lifetime essentially in this chamber. He isn't afraid of the president or the vice president. He doesn't really have anyone to answer to at this stage. And he was a little bit more freed to make a decision that would have put him on the other side of Senate Republican leadership. At the same time, this is John McCain. He's known for being a maverick, but he's also a party guy. He's a party guy that went along with the process of opening up debate on this, which many people believed was essentially naive because the process would have been closed and would not have included Democrats as he wanted it to. So it's a little bit of a contrast here. The party guy who allowed the vote to go forward, and the maverick who's essentially on his kind of, as his daughter put it, in the winter of his life, putting out, giving an opportunity for this bill to go in a completely different direction and putting a thumb in the eye of this president and of Senate leadership.
You know, McConnell, you know, it seemed wanted him to come back, of course, to have their colleague back with him, but also because he was going to be a yes on motion to proceed. And then now, look at how he voted. Christine, Obamacare this morning is the law of the land.
It is.
It will remain that way until or if something changes. So what does it mean for American people?
And open enrollment isn't just 3 months. So this administration has to decide whether they want to beef up the advertising and the rollout for open enrollment. They have to decide how the IRS is going to handle for the next tax season, whether people will be fined for not having a. There still is a law in place here that has several government agencies, federal agencies that are responsible for rolling it out, and it's wounded. This law is wounded. No question. I can show you a picture of the states with counties with only one insurer, and that is expected to increase. There are 3 states that have counties with no insurers at all. That's 25,000 people who don't have access to the Obamacare markets right now because of the insurance problems and the companies that are dropping out, and premiums are rising. So fix it or forget it. That's the question for Congress and for Washington right now. And for this White House, they do have incredible leverage at HHS, at the IRS, you know, to decide that they want to fix it or at least hold it together so it doesn't implode.
You know, we're going to have both Democratic and Republican lawmakers on. We're going to ask them, what now? You know, this is on you. What are you going to do about this now? And Nia, I want to take a step back and reflect on really the last 24 hours here in sort of the metaphorical thumbs down that John McCain just gave, not just to healthcare, but in a way, the presidency, you know, saying, I'm going to block right now your signature only, you know, legislative initiative that's out there right now. Yesterday, we had the Boy Scouts of America saying, you know, we didn't like your speech, your political speech. We have the military saying we're not going to implement your transgender policy. And you have a lot of senators saying we're not going to let you fire Jeff Sessions. This is a whole lot of people, institutional people, including people of his own party, saying you are not doing this right, Mr. President.
Yeah, it's interesting because early on in the week, even before the health care bill went down, I was texting with a Republican. I was like, you know, this seems to be sort of a different kind of week. And we've seen from this president difficult weeks before. But I was talking with this Republican, and they were saying this seems like it might be the worst week of this presidency so far because there was failure on so many different levels. I mean, even a rebuke from conservatives, right, who were upset at his treatment at Jeff Sessions, Scaramucci's first week has not gone well. It's gone disastrously.
You think?
Yeah, I'm going to say that. I'm going to say that, and we'll see what happens with him. But you're right. I mean, there was this rebuke from all levels, and Republicans who we hadn't seen before, basically putting a red line, a line in the sand in terms of what this president had been doing. And I think, this, we'll see what happens. We'll see if there are any further shakeups in this White House, if they sort of get the message. But it really was an extraordinary week for this presidency in terms of blowback from so many different corners and people you would think would be supportive of this presidency, right? People from the military, obviously the Boy Scouts, a very traditional organization, having to send out a letter essentially saying, we didn't agree with what the president said in front of those 40,000 Boy Scouts. So really extraordinary week, and we'll see if anything changes if the president kind of gets the message that this didn't go well.
All right. Thank you very much, all of you. Alex Burns, Abby Phillip, Christine Romans, Nia Malika Henderson.
It is interesting. The president hasn't, put anything out, no statements yet this morning, either out loud or in the 140 characters he likes to use.
Maybe he's speechless? I don't know.
Doubt that. We will see.
A lot ahead for us this Friday. Sorry, not sorry. The White House Chief of Communications calls the Chief of Staff a, quote, paranoid schizophrenic. And that, folks, is the only part we can say on television. And today, no apologies for what he said. No reaction from the president on that whole tirade, at least not yet.
All right, and no regrets. Jeff Sessions says he made the right choice, recusing himself from the Russia investigation. Wonder what the president thinks about that. And some really important news about sanctions overnight. Russia punches back. These are on sanctions the president has yet to even sign. Will he sign them? American diplomats kicked out of Russia. We'll give you the latest next.
Beyond is a natural pet food that goes beyond assuming ingredients are safe to knowing they are. Going beyond expectations because our pets deserve it. Beyond, natural pet food.
We've all been affected by
When Sean Spicer resigned last week as White House press secretary, we lost Melissa McCarthy's uncanny parody on Saturday Night Live, and we will miss her. But thank God there is a new impersonation to fill the void. Watch this send-up of Anthony Scaramucci.
I love the president, thank you. I love the president. I love it. I love you.
I love you.
I love
I
you.
love you.
I friggin' love you. Thank you. I'm going to fire so many people. I don't know who it's going to be, Reince, but I'm going to get to the bottom of the leakage in the White House. You hear me, Reince?
That's actor and comedian Mario Cantone. He's playing Scaramucci on Comedy Central's The President's Show. And Mario joins us now. Great to see you.
What time is it? What time do you kids get up in the morning? I don't know how you do this. This is brutal. I only got up for you, for him.
I know you
because
did.
he promised me sex. That's why I got up.
Oh, my God.
With you.
Thank you for the flowers.
By the way.
Thank you for the flowers, Chris. I appreciate it.
Well,
were you proud of me? He was tweeting. He was calling me at all hours of the night.
He loves your impersonation of
he was. Oh no, he was giving me like advice. Like I was like, "Thank you, Stella Adler." Okay, Uda Hagen does.
But here's why. Because this is different than what you normally do. You are a brilliant performer. Everybody knows that. But the relevance to our political culture now, McCarthy wasn't just funny. It was about the window. Baldwin's not just funny. It's about the window that the satire doesn't have to be exaggerated to become comedy.
See, yeah, I know. You look at it, beyond. You look at it very deeply because you're a political commentator. Look, let me tell you something. The day this happened, like when someone tweeted the comparison, I was lying in bed depressed. I couldn't get out of bed. You know me, I sleep late. So all of a sudden that happened, and then another person did it. And I don't have a ton of Twitter followers because I leave it there like an abandoned amusement park. So I just I tweeted, I retweeted it, and then it went crazy. And then 4 days later, Anthony called me and said, will you do
Anthony
this?
Adaminiak,
Yes.
who is Trump in The President Show on Comedy Central.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But you so quickly channeled him. You
Tammany.
figured out Anthony Scaramucci so quickly. We have another clip. Let's play people, and then let's play it for people, and you'll explain how you did it. Watch this.
There's an old Italian expression my mother used to use when somebody hurt her. She'd say, stick the umbrella up my ass, but don't open it.
Wow! I love ethnics.
And I love President Trump.
Because he does. He goes, chump. Well, I'm Italian, and I know this guy. I just
You
know
recognize that archetype.
I recognize him. I got to tell you, when I listened to the phone, I saw the interview you did with him, Chris, and then because he forced me to, and he was like, I said, what time's your show on? He goes, you don't know what time my show's on? I said, I'm not up at 6 o'clock in the morning to look at your pretty face. Then he said, Chris, you tweeted me again. He said, look, listen, the phone interview is really interesting. So I listened to the phone interview, and then halfway through it, I texted you, and I was like, this is exhausting. It's draining. I said, I know Italians repeat themselves, but this guy's taking it to a whole other level. Oh my God,
But I mean, he did say things like that. There's an old Italian expression.
Yeah, well, he loves the Italian expression.
He really does.
He does. Yeah, he did that a lot. He did. I just think he's. Yeah, it's
What
like
do
this
you
old-
think is so funny?
I just think. Well, there was one moment in it that you didn't show, but
Is it too dirty?
No, it's not. It's
What
my
is it?
favorite thing, and no one really laughed at it. But when he said they were talking about the theme of the show, because there's always a theme of the president's show every week, and he said, "So tell him, it's Mooch, tell him the theme." And I went Joe Paterno, and so that happened with you. Oh, it was, yeah, and
he
then
did quote Coach Paterno.
and my favorite thing is just going, well, scusate me. Reality. I mean, scusate me is so like Italian. It's hilarious.
Do we have time for another clip, or do people have to watch online? All right, you guys have to watch online where Scaramucci slaps the president and says, "Snap out of it."
It's nice to be part of the political climate and part of this. It really is.
And I know you take
feel
it
really-
seriously as
I
well
do.
as serious art.
Oh, I absolutely do. I do. Well, because if I didn't, he'd come around and
That's
just.
right.
No, you've
Scary.
got a great talent. There's a void, and
Yeah.
who could fill it better than you?
Well,
That was
look,
fun.
I'm just happy that Anthony and Comedy Central and the President Show called me, because I love the show and I love doing it. And you got to strike while the iron's hot.
Absolutely.
Who knows if he'll be here in October?
Next week.
You
You're
know,
so
we
right.
don't know. I
Well,
got to do it now.
We're going to enjoy it while you do
I got to
You are
take it for
so
all it's
great,
worth.
Maria. Thank you so much for
Good
being
luck on your book.
Thank
What's
you.
it called? Amanda wakes up with an
It's your
erection.
new
What's it called?
No.
Something like that. Oh my
Amanda
God.
Wakes Up. It is a touching and poignant novel that gives insight into journalism.
It's your new beach read.
Toss to the next show.
Dirty mom.
Terrible. See what Italians do?
Read that.
Forget it. I'm taking it from you. CNN Newsroom with Poppy Harlow and John Berman is going to pick up right after this break.
You're so great. Thank you for being here. Now, New Yorker reporting an interview with Anthony Scaramucci and Chris's interview yesterday with Anthony Scaramucci. I'll play you just one excerpt about how he seems to be very, very focused on the leaks coming out of the White House. That's his top of priority. And he told Ryan Lizza they'll all be fired by me. I fired one guy the other day. I have 3 to 4 people I'll fire tomorrow. I'll get you the person who leaked that to you, Reince Priebus. If you want to leak something, he'll be asked to resign very shortly. How's this playing out with the president's agenda?
I don't think it's playing very well. And Allison, I think this is emblematic of the problem the White House has had in terms of trying to have an impact on the president's agenda on Capitol Hill. The White House seems wholly consumed by that which bothers Donald Trump, the president. He doesn't like leaks, he doesn't like disloyalty, and the White House is singularly focused on addressing problems that annoy President Trump, and they've dropped the ball when it comes to presidential leadership on the Hill. Look, there's plenty of blame to go around. Mitch McConnell deserves blame. Senate and House Republicans collectively, even though House Republicans passed the bill, they're all a part of this mess at the end of the day. But the X factor in getting big things like this done is always the presidency, because it's the one adult in the room that can corral wayward members of a party, even possibly bring members of another party because of a national base of support. It's the one person in the room that was elected by the country and not by a state or a district. And in this case, President Trump has really been absent from the public stage in creating the public space for Senate Republicans to take the tough votes, to do things they may not want to do for, in a sense, the greater policy and political good from the point of view of Republicans when it comes to replacing and repealing Obamacare. And look at how vital Republicans really think repealing Obamacare is politically. Mitch McConnell's a very keen electoral operator. He looks at elections. They are always very important to him. And yet he was trying to jam his own members to vote for a bill that is very unpopular. And then when that failed, he was trying to jam them on a bill that would raise premiums 20% just to keep the process alive. That's how important Republicans believe repealing and replacing Obamacare is to their prospects in the 2018 midterm elections, that they were willing to do all of these things just to get to the next step. And it all came crashing down, and now they have to figure out what's next, and I don't think they know.
But it's all a window into what the original proposition's problem was. It was that the idea is not just to repeal or replace, to make better. And if you're going to raise premiums and if people are going to lose care, how is that better? Even Republicans had to own that on top of party loyalty. But all the roads lead back to the White House. There's a reason this was never called Trump care. And it's not a good reason, right? Obamacare was called that because the president had a leadership role. Here, the president didn't seem to have one, and it raises the question of who gets blamed for that.
Well, and there were two factors here. One is, if you talk to lawmakers who spoke personally to Trump about this, he had some dinners in the White House, it was clear that he didn't really understand what was in his own bill. And I think that sent a worrying signal to a lot of lawmakers. The second thing is, publicly, he would come out and threaten and lean on members like Dean Heller of Nevada, but then turn around and say that the same bill that he'd been threatening in the past was mean. So it wasn't clear where Trump wanted to go exactly. And the other problem is it's also clear that Trump didn't care particularly about health care policy, at least not as much as Russia, shutting down leak investigations. I mean, I thought Scaramucci's interviews with you guys yesterday morning and with Ryan Lizza last night or 2 nights ago were a real reflection of what is on Trump's mind. And health care, I'm pretty sure, was a subject that didn't come up in either of those interviews.
Yeah, so David Drucker, in terms of the White House Chief of Staff, I know that you're not in the prognostication business, but does Reince Priebus survive the next week?
That's a very good question. I think part of the lack of leadership coming from the White House has been that there has been no chain of command in addressing all of these priorities. Reince Priebus is going to get a lot of blame for the failure of health care. As Chris pointed out, he was brought in because he was the Washington guy that knew the players and could help facilitate things. But it all starts at the top. And when the president brings in a so-called communications director, and that communications director does not report up the chain of command to the chief of staff, but reports directly to the president and then starts going around the chief of staff, threatening to fire everybody, outing the chief of staff as he sees it as being a leaker. There's no way you can present a united front and work with your party on the Hill to actually get anything done, because Republicans on the Hill are looking at this chaos and they're saying to themselves, these guys don't know what they're doing, they can't be trusted, and if things go south, they're not going to have my back, because they don't even have each other's back. It's a war over there, and this is a big fail. And if the president wants to right the ship, he's got to decide who's in charge, create a chain of command, and he's got to then let people go through that chain of command, and he's got to tell everybody else to shut up. And in some ways, he should start with himself and make sure that his tweets, which do have an impact and have an ability to reach people, are more focused, more more open towards pushing his policies and not towards pushing his own personal agenda.
It's, Scaramucci said what he said. He gave Lizza one heck of a story.
For sure.
But he, I think it's fair to say, is a symptom of the disease, not the disease itself. It's been going on for a long time in this White House. It seems that one thing that may bring the Republicans together right now is they've all been asking the president to stop going after their own. What he did to Jeff Sessions, stop the madness in his own White House. We'll see if he can get them to do it.
The day is young. Panel, thank you very much for all of the insights.
All right, so what is even a possibility when it comes to bipartisan work to deliver better health care for people? Isn't that what's supposed to be the goal? We're going to talk to a Republican congressman next.
And as I said, we look forward to our colleagues on the other side suggesting what they have in mind. So now, Mr. President, it's time to move on.
All right, that was Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell moments after a very dramatic vote on Capitol Hill. It happened early this morning, and there was a stunning no vote from Senator John McCain, sinking the GOP's effort to repeal Obamacare. What's next? Joining us now is Republican Congressman Scott Taylor of Virginia to talk about this and much more. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning, Allison. How are you?
I'm well. I don't know what time you went to sleep, but what was your reaction when you saw John McCain get up and give that very dramatic thumbs down?
Well, I didn't see that. But obviously this morning I woke up to the news. But I'm certainly disappointed. Of course, what happened last night doesn't help the folks that are hurting under this law, businesses and individuals across the country, and certainly in my district. So hopefully we can work together and get something that addresses those issues.
Do you think that the turmoil in the White House that has been so colorfully outlined in places like the New Yorker, yesterday here, the new communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, kind of laid it out. Do you think that that has been getting in the way of successful legislation and the president's agenda?
At times, yes, of course. Listen, I think, I know that there was efforts, of course, from the White House to try to get some of these senators, of course, to get on board. And relationships matter, no matter where you are. No matter what form, whether it's business or in the private sector or in government, relationships matter. So there's no question about that some of that could hinder the ability to get successful legislation passed.
Look, I mean, if the chief of staff, Reince Priebus, is locked in a battle royale with the communications director, how can he be doing his job?
You've said if the president removes him, that you